As the gentle rocking of the ship settles into a steady rhythm that feels almost like breathing, the pirates slowly rise into the second movement of their endless day. A time when the sun climbs higher and the sea shifts its colors from pale silver to deep blue, and the warm air begins to shimmer as though the horizon itself were melting into the sky. And during these long midday hours the crew moves with the slow certainty of people who have repeated these same motions hundreds of times yet never grown entirely weary of them. For there is something hypnotic about coiling thick ropes, something meditative about sanding down salt-stiffened planks, something quietly fulfilling about tending to the ship that not only carries them but defines them. And while they work they hum fragments of old sea shanties passed down through fishermen, whalers, and outlaw captains who once believed their names would be remembered, though the sea rarely remembers anything except the weight of ships it has swallowed. And as the sun beats down they pause to splash seawater on their faces, laughing when one of them receives an unexpected wave from the wind-whipped surface, that brief moment of levity reminding them that although their lives are harsh, they are also free in a way few on land could ever understand, because freedom at sea is not a grand declaration but a quiet truth felt in the bones, a constant awareness that no master waits to command them, no king watches from a throne, no law chases them except the horizon itself, and this knowledge flows through them like the tide, steady and unspoken, shaping every mundane action of the day, even as they split coconuts taken from a distant island or repair a torn sail with fingers calloused by years of storms, rope burns and cannon recoil. And the ship becomes almost silent as they slip into the half-dreaming state of sailors who have stared at water for too long, where the line between waking and drifting becomes thin, and there thoughts wander to memories of old ports, lost loves, broken promises, and taverns glowing with lantern light where laughter spilled onto the cobblestones and music drifted through haze and rum. And though these memories soften their expressions, none of them speaks of returning, for the land has lost its hold on them, and the sea, for all its unpredictability, feels far more honest. As the afternoon deepens and the waves grow slightly restless, the lookout perched high among the swaying masts sharpens his gaze, scanning the distance for anything unusual. A splash too large to be a fish, a shadow that doesn't belong to a cloud, a sliver of white canvas barely breaking the line where sky meets sea. And he alone understands that boredom is a luxury that never lasts on a pirate ship, for danger hides itself in silence as easily as in thunder. And when at last he spots a faint smudge of movement on the horizon he does not shout immediately but watches, breath held, as the shape becomes clearer, and then his voice rings out across the deck, slow and steady like someone announcing a change in the weather, and the crew jolts from their daze, moving not with panic but with that peculiar smoothness born of countless close escapes, and every pirate knows what to do before the order is even spoken, some hauling the sails to catch more wind, others slipping below deck to ready the cannons, while a few climb the rigging with knives clenched in their teeth, preparing for whatever may come next. Yet not every sail on the horizon belongs to an enemy. Sometimes it is a wandering merchant ship weighted down with spices and linen, sometimes a lost whaling vessel whose crew will trade stories for directions, and sometimes it is a ghostly ship no one can name, one that appears only in heat-shimmering glimpses before fading into the haze. And as the shape ahead draws nearer the pirates murmur among themselves, guessing its flag, its purpose, its strength, until at last the colors drift into view, rippling like a painted whisper against the wind, revealing that the ship is neither foe nor friend but something in between, a privateer vessel, authorized by crown and coin to hunt pirates yet often sharing drinks with them in quiet coves when officials are not watching, and the two crews call cautious greetings across the water, exchanging rumors of storms, shifting trade routes, and a wealthy convoy rumored to be passing through these waters within the next week. And though they part ways with polite nods, the encounter leaves a subtle tension on the deck, a reminder that alliances at sea are as shallow as footprints on sand, easily washed away by the next wave of fortune. When the privateer finally disappears behind a glowing veil of afternoon heat, the pirates settle once more into their wandering routine, but the energy aboard the ship has shifted, and now conversations spark in low, eager tones about the rumored convoy, each man imagining chests filled with gleaming coins, porcelain as thin as seashells, fragrant tobacco leaves packed into wooden crates, and silk shimmering like moonlit water. And though they remain outwardly calm, their movements gain a new precision, as though the mere idea of treasure has polished their focus, and the captain, an aging figure whose weathered face is carved with the stories of a lifetime, observes this quiet transformation with a faint smile, knowing that hope, more than hunger or fear, is what keeps a pirate's heart beating. As the sun leans westward, softening its glare into a golden haze, the ship begins to glow as though lit from within, and the ocean becomes a vast sheet of molten amber that flickers with every ripple, and the crew takes a rare moment to rest, some leaning against barrels while others lie sprawled across the warm deck with their hats tipped over their eyes, listening to the distant cries of unseen birds and the rhythmic slapping of waves against the hull. And the world shrinks to nothing but color and light and motion, a cradle in which even the fiercest pirate becomes vulnerable to dreams, and in these brief hours of stillness they remember fragments of childhood on distant shores, faces that have blurred with time, lullabies sung beneath thatched roofs, the smell of bread warming on hearthstones, and these memories drift through them like passing clouds, harmless and soft, until the boatswain's gentle whistle calls them back to the present, reminding them that dusk approaches and dusk at sea is never a time for sleep. For dusk is when the world changes texture, when the wind shifts and stories grow bolder, when shadows lengthen across the deck like fingers reaching from another realm, and as lanterns are lit one by one, casting warm circles of light that sway with the ship's movement, the pirates gather near the bow, sharpening blades with a patient confidence that borders on ritual, their hands moving in practiced strokes as sparks jump like fireflies into the night. And all the while the captain watches the horizon for signs only he seems able to read, the faint thickening of the air, the unusual tilt of the clouds, the subtle deepening of the sea's color. Subtle warnings that the weather may be turning, though he says nothing yet, for there is no sense in stirring worry before the sky decides what it intends to do. And as night finally spills across the sea, vast and velvet black, the ship becomes an island of flickering gold drifting through an infinite darkness, and the pirates shift into their nocturnal rhythms, some taking the first watch while others descend below deck to share bowls of stew and tales of cursed isles, sea monsters with eyes like lanterns, and ancient shipwrecks that still groan beneath the waves. And though most know these stories are exaggerated or imagined, they listen with rapt attention, for there is a unique comfort in fear shared among comrades. Fear softened by laughter and rum until it becomes something almost pleasant, like the thrill of a storm viewed from a safe harbor. Under the dim lantern glow that sways gently with every breath of the ship, the pirates settle deeper into the long night, a time when the sea becomes so dark and smooth that the vessel seems to float not on water but on a vast expanse of polished obsidian, and the creak of the timbers beneath them takes on a quieter, more intimate tone, like the murmuring of an old friend recounting memories too soft to be spoken aloud. And as the watch changes hands, the fresh crew members ascend to the deck, rubbing sleep from their eyes while those relieved from duty descend the narrow steps with a heavy, dream-laden weariness, knowing that sleep will not come quickly in the heat and closeness below, where hammocks sway like cocoons in the lantern-dappled gloom, and the sound of the sea is muffled to a distant heartbeat, steady and ancient, and even as they lie still, many of them remain half awake, listening to the groans of the ship and the murmur of those who are already drifting into dreams, shaped by memory, regret, and the distant promise of treasure. Above, the wind grows calmer, and the sails slacken slightly, billowing with a lazy grace that hints at a coming stillness, and the helmsman rests his hand lightly upon the wheel, feeling the subtle tremors of the wood as if listening to the ship's pulse, waiting for any sign that the weather might shift, for he knows that nighttime calm can be a deceptive gift, that beyond the edge of sight gathering clouds may already be assembling into the shape of a storm, though for now the heavens remain clear, sprinkled with thousands of sharp silent stars that shimmer like grains of crushed ice scattered across an endless velvet cloth, and the lookout, lonely in his perch high above, tilts his head back to watch them, marveling not at their beauty but at their stillness, for unlike the sea, the stars do not move with the wind. They burn in a silence that dwarfs the entire world, and to the lookout this immobility is almost unnerving, a reminder that while the ship and its crew wander without destination, the universe remains fixed and unmoving, watching, indifferent. Below deck, the quiet is broken by pockets of soft conversation, voices lowered not out of fear but out of an unspoken pact to protect the fragile peace of the night, and one pirate, younger than the rest and not yet hardened by years at sea, asks an older crewman to tell a story, not one of monsters or curses or battles, but one of land, of what it felt like to walk on soil that did not shift beneath your feet, to breathe air scented not with salt but with grass and earth. And the old pirate, after a moment of stillness, describes a village so small that you could walk from end to end in the time it takes a kettle to boil, where mornings smelled of bread and evenings smelled of wood smoke, and where the sky at dusk glowed amber against the silhouettes of hills that rolled like gentle waves frozen in time. And as he speaks, the others become very still, each imagining his own version of that long-lost place, whether real or dreamed. And for a moment the ship feels less like an outlaw's refuge and more like a drifting fragment of all the homes they once knew but can never return to. Yet these moments of softness never last long at sea, for the ocean demands attention even in its calmest hours, and soon a sudden gust ripples across the deck, rattling the rigging and snapping the slackened sails into new tension, and the helmsman adjusts the wheel with careful precision, listening to the faint hum of the rudder slicing through the dark water, while the lookout leans forward to peer into the ink-black distance, alert now, sensing a shift in the air's texture, for sailors do not rely solely on sight. There are moods in the wind and tones in the waves that reveal truths long before the eye can confirm them, and with every subtle change in temperature, every odd hesitation in the breeze, every distant echo that does not belong, they read the sea the way others read letters on a page, though the language is older, deeper, and perfected only through a lifetime of practice. As the hours stretch on, the night becomes thicker, and the lanterns cast longer shadows that stretch like whispered secrets across the deck, while the crew drifts between wakefulness and the syrupy pull of sleep, and the ship itself moves with a slow, hypnotic grace, gliding forward as though guided by an unseen hand, and the pirates begin to hum a low, aimless tune. No melody, no rhythm, just a murmured exhale that rises and falls with the swell of the sea, blending with the creaking of the masts until the entire ship seems to be breathing, a giant wooden creature alive with memories and motion, and this strange shared drowsiness wraps around them like a warm blanket, softening sharp thoughts, smoothing old wounds, and carrying them into a kind of waking dream. In this dream state they recall strange moments from past voyages, the time they found a floating barrel of sweet wine in the middle of nowhere, as though the sea had offered them a gift, the night they anchored near a barren island and heard distant singing that had no source, the morning when the water glowed with an eerie blue light, illuminated by countless tiny creatures that turned the waves into rivers of flame. And these memories drift together like overlapping stories told by the sea itself, merging into a tapestry woven from rumor, truth, fear, and wonder. For at sea the boundaries between the real and the imagined blur, and even the most hardened pirate knows that the world is much larger and stranger than any man can understand. Hours pass, though none aboard the ship could say how many, for time at sea flows differently at night, stretching, folding, collapsing, expanding, and the stars wheel overhead in silent procession, while the ship glides through the dark as though moving not across water but through a vast dreamscape where sound is muted and distance is infinite, and at last the faintest hint of dawn touches the horizon, a thin line of pale gray that grows slowly brighter, like the gentle exhale of a world being reborn, and the first pirate to notice it does not speak but simply watches, letting the light seep into his tired eyes, feeling the shift in the wind as morning approaches, bringing with it renewed possibility, renewed danger, renewed life. He knows that when the sun finally rises, painting the deck in warm gold and stirring the crew from their shallow slumber, a new day of their wandering life will begin, a day that might hold treasure or battle or calm waters or storms that tear the sky open, but whatever awaits them, they will face it as they always have, together, guided by instinct and bound by the strange, unbreakable brotherhood of those who have traded land for sea, safety for freedom, certainty for the wild, shifting truth of the horizon. As the faint gray line of dawn stretches slowly across the horizon, the pirates begin to feel the subtle shift of the world around them, not through sight at first but through the coolness of the air, the way the wind softens as though holding its breath, and the quiet murmur of the waves as they take on a gentler rhythm, as if the sea itself is preparing to shed the heavy cloak of night, and one by one the men stir from their shallow sleep, rising from coils of rope and hammocks with the sluggish, dream-heavy movements of those who have grown accustomed to never truly resting, their eyes half-lidded, their limbs stiff, yet their minds already falling back into the familiar patterns of life at sea. A life where morning brings not refreshment but another stretch of endless water, another cycle of labor, watchfulness, and the subtle, constant hope that something unexpected might appear beyond the shimmering line where sky meets sea. The sky brightens slowly, reluctantly, as though embarrassed to interrupt the deep stillness of night, and the first hints of color, muted pinks, dusty blues, bleed gently into the darkness, softening it rather than replacing it, creating a fragile, in-between world where shadows still cling to the ship's timbers while the air carries that mild, hushed solemnity found only in the early moments before sunrise. And as the pirates move about the deck they speak little, for dawn is a sacred hour at sea, a time when even the most talkative sailor feels the weight of the moment and allows silence to linger, letting the creak of the masts and the whisper of ropes provide the only soundtrack to the world's slow awakening. The cook, always the first to regain his rhythm, emerges from below deck carrying a dented tin pot that releases soft trails of steam into the cool air, the smell of bitter morning brew drifting lazily across the deck and mingling with the brine and the subtle earthy scent of wood that has absorbed a lifetime of storms, sun and spray. And as the men gather around with half-smiles and weary gratitude, the warm cups in their hands become tiny islands of comfort in the vast, indifferent sea, and even the sternest among them takes a slow sip, closing his eyes for a moment as though drawing strength from the heat that spreads through his chest. With the first light growing bolder, details emerge from the shadows, the worn knots in the planks, the faint salt crust overlaying the rails, the frayed edges of a rope too long exposed to the elements, and the pirates reacquaint themselves with their world, checking each essential part of the ship with the care one might give to a beloved old animal, for they know that survival depends as much on vigilance as on courage. And as they inspect the rigging, adjust the sails and tighten bolts, loosened by the night's shifting winds, they fall into a rhythm older than any single man aboard, a rhythm passed down through generations of seafarers who once stood on similar decks under similar skies. The sun finally breaks the horizon in a slow, molten bloom of gold, sending ripples of warm light across the water that shatter into countless sparkling fragments, each glittering momentarily before vanishing beneath the next gentle wave. And the sea, transformed by the dawn, seems to stretch infinitely in every direction, a vast, shimmering plain where secrets hide beneath the surface and every distant shadow could be a promise or a threat, though in that first radiant moment the pirates allow themselves to simply look, to admire the beauty that so often escapes them amid battle, fear and hunger, and for a few quiet breaths they stand united not by ambition or danger but by the shared experience of witnessing the world beginning again. As the day takes shape, the captain steps onto the deck, his silhouette outlined against the rising sun, and though he moves with the slow, deliberate grace of a man whose bones have absorbed too many years of salt and wind, his eyes are alert, clear, scanning the horizon with the instinct of someone who has lived more years at sea than on land, and he feels in the wind a mixture of calm and anticipation, something that suggests the day ahead may hold more than routine labor, something that stirs the faint electricity in the air that seasoned sailors recognize as a subtle sign of changing fortunes, though he keeps this suspicion to himself for now. Breakfast is brief and simple, hardtack softened in water, a bit of dried fruit saved from a previous raid, and perhaps a strip of salted meat if luck has been kind. Yet the men eat with quiet satisfaction, chewing slowly while listening to the distant cries of seabirds that appear only at certain latitudes, their presence a small comfort, a sign of proximity to land even if no shoreline is yet visible. And as the crew finishes their meal they disperse into their duties, some climbing the rigging, others scrubbing the deck, and a few taking their positions near the cannons, polishing metal that will one day save or end lives, their movements steady and unhurried, as though time stretches differently aboard a ship forever in motion. The sun climbs higher, warming the wood beneath their feet, drying the last traces of night moisture from the ropes and sails, and as the day fully takes hold the sea becomes a great expanse of glittering blue framed by nothing but sky and wind, a landscape without boundaries where the only constants are the ship beneath them and the memories they carry, memories of storms, battles, losses and rare victories, of faces left behind and futures uncertain, and though none speak of such things, each pirate holds within him a quiet reservoir of stories, some cherished, some painful, all woven into the fabric of who he has become, and the ship itself, with its scars and stains and countless patches, becomes a repository of those shared histories, a floating testament to survival. As the morning drifts into midday and the heat deepens, the pirates settle into the gentle monotony that accompanies the calmest days at sea, a monotony not of boredom but of steady, reliable rhythm, like the beating of a heart, and in this rhythm there is comfort, for it reminds them that the world, despite its dangers, also offers moments of peace. Moments where the only sounds are the soft sigh of wind in the sails and the steady lap of water against the hull. And in those quiet hours the men work with an almost meditative focus, their thoughts drifting like leaves on a slow-moving river, unhurried and untroubled, carried by the steady pulse of the sea. Yet beneath that peace lies the unspoken understanding that anything, a distant sail, an unexpected shift in the wind, a glint of metal beneath the water, can change everything in an instant, that fortune is as fickle as the weather, and that the sea grants calm only so that the next storm feels sharper by contrast, and though they do not fear this truth, they carry it with them always, a silent companion shaping each breath, each decision, each cautious glance toward the horizon. As the hours drift onward and the sun hangs higher in the sky, the ship settles into that curious balance of motion and stillness that only sailors truly understand, a state where the world appears unchanged from one heartbeat to the next, yet the vessel is always moving, always gliding over new water, always leaving behind a path that disappears the moment it is made. And in this gentle continuity the pirates continue with their small but essential tasks, mending frayed lines that could betray them in a storm, re-tearing the rigging to keep rot at bay, polishing the darkened brass of their pistols and the dulled edges of their cutlasses, not because they hunger for violence but because they know that neglect in any form is the true enemy at sea. And as they work, they speak of ordinary things. Who snores the loudest, which port had the best bread, the time someone tried to outdrink the quartermaster and woke up wearing a chicken as a hat, and their laughter rises softly into the open air, carried away on the wind until it becomes just another sound among the whispering waves and the low sigh of the sails. The heat of midday deepens, turning the deck into a warm, sun-baked expanse that smells of salt, wood, and faint traces of pitch, and some of the men strip off their shirts, revealing skin browned and scarred by years of hard labor under an unforgiving sky, while others retreat into patches of shade near stacked barrels or under the curve of a sail, where they whittle bits of scrap wood into tiny figurines, carve patterns into the handles of knives, or simply close their eyes and listen, counting the creaks and groans of the ship as though reciting a quiet prayer, for in the familiar noises of the vessel they find reassurance, a reminder that their fragile world of timber and rope still holds together against the endless pressure of the sea below and the immense weight of the sky above. Somewhere near the stern, the ship's surgeon, more a jack of all trades than a true physician, sits with his small chest of tools and tinctures open, checking his meager supplies, rewrapping bandages, sniffing suspicious bottles, and sorting out herbs that have not fared well in the damp salt air, knowing that if misfortune comes in the form of splintered bone or a deep cut from flying metal, he will have to make do with whatever is at hand, for pirates cannot expect the luxury of miracles, only the stubborn endurance of bodies that have learned to survive. As the afternoon stretches out, the lookout spots a faint smudge on the horizon, and once again a subtle ripple of tension moves through the crew, though this time it is tempered by the steady calm of experience, and the captain lifts his spyglass with an unhurried hand, observing the distant shape with a practiced eye, noting the angle of its sails, the cut of its hull, the way it moves through the swells, and after a long, thoughtful silence he announces that it is a merchant vessel, heavy and slow, a tempting prize. Yet he does not immediately order pursuit, for a pirate's life is not merely a string of attacks but a careful calculation of risk and reward, and he weighs in his mind the strength of his own crew, the condition of his ship, the unknown dangers that might accompany such a vessel. Hidden cannons, desperate defenders, or the possibility of an escort lurking just out of sight. And while the men glance toward him with hopeful eyes, imagining the weight of coins in their hands and the smell of foreign spices, they also trust his judgment, for they know that greed has sunk many a ship faster than any storm. For a time he simply watches, letting the ship continue on its current course, and the pirates return to their tasks, though their movements now carry a faint tremor of excitement, and fragments of conversation turn toward speculation. What flag might the merchant fly? What goods might it bear? How heavily guarded might its hold be? But the captain, after another period of quiet, finally lowers the spyglass and gives the order to adjust their heading only slightly, choosing to shadow the distant vessel from afar rather than rush toward it blindly, a decision that speaks to his cautious wisdom, for at sea the most dangerous enemy is often the one you do not yet see. The crew obeys without complaint, for they understand that patience is a kind of weapon, and there is a peculiar satisfaction in watching from a distance, lingering on the edge of possibility, knowing that fortune has not yet chosen its side. As the day begins to cool and the sun lowers its gaze, the distant merchant ship veers off, its outline slowly diminishing into a hazy blur, and the pirates accept this with quiet resignation, not as a loss but as another turn in the endless game they play with fate, for they know that in time there will be other sails on the horizon, other chances to test their courage and skill, and meanwhile their ship remains afloat, their bellies are not empty, and the wind still fills their canvases and, in the fragile balance of their existence, that is enough. Toward late afternoon the cry of gulls grows louder, their white bodies circling high overhead, and the crew's eyes brighten with the knowledge that land must be near, even if it lies just beyond the curve of the world, and soon a faint smudge of green appears on the horizon, growing clearer with each passing moment until it resolves into the shape of a small island, crowned with palm trees and ringed with pale sand that glows softly beneath the descending sun. The captain orders the ship to angle toward it, and a gentle stir passes through the crew, not the frantic excitement of battle but the quiet relief of men who have spent too long surrounded by nothing but open water, for even a tiny patch of land, uninhabited and unnoticed by maps, offers gifts the sea cannot. Fresh fruit, solid earth, the simple joy of walking without the constant sway beneath one's feet. As they draw nearer, the water turns a brighter, shallower shade of blue, allowing glimpses of coral and darting fish below, and the ship glides cautiously into a natural cove, where the shoreline opens its arms in a welcoming curve, and the anchor slips into the water with a muted splash and a heavy final clank of chain, the vessel coming to rest with a small, contented shiver as if grateful for the brief respite. A small boat is lowered, and a handful of pirates climb in with easy familiarity, oars dipping into the water with soft rhythmic strokes that send the craft gliding toward the shore, while those who remain aboard lean on the rails, watching the approach with a faint longing, imagining the feel of sand between their toes and the smell of leaves and earth beneath the salt thick air. When the boat reaches land and the men step out, they pause for a moment, standing motionless as their legs reacquaint themselves with stillness, some laughing quietly as they adjust to ground that does not tilt or sway, and then they fan out across the small beach, scanning the tree line for signs of danger while also searching for coconuts, freshwater pools, or any other small blessing the island might offer. In the dappled shade beneath the palms, they find clusters of fallen coconuts and set to work with knives and makeshift tools, cracking them open to reveal cool, sweet liquid and soft white flesh that tastes almost impossibly fresh after so many weeks of salted meat and hard biscuits, and as they eat and drink, salty sweat drying slowly on their sun-warmed skin, they feel for a brief, precious moment like ordinary men on an ordinary outing, not outlaws, not hunters of ships, not fugitives from distant laws, but simply tired travelers resting in a patch of shade while the world outside their reach continues on its own indifferent course. A few of the pirates wander deeper into the island, moving carefully through undergrowth alive with insects and unseen animals, and they soon discover a small, trickling stream that carves its way through the earth, its water clear and cool as glass, and they cup their hands to drink, tasting the faint metallic bite of stone and soil instead of the endless salt of the sea, then fill barrels and casks to bring back to the ship, every drop a quiet victory. They return to the shore loaded with their finds, and as the boat ferries these small treasures back and forth, the sun sinks lower, casting long shadows that stretch across the sand and turning the sky into a canvas of orange, pink, and soft purple, a slow, glowing farewell to the day. By the time the last boat returns to the ship and the anchor is raised once more, the first stars are beginning to appear, timid and scattered in the fading light, and the pirates move about their tasks with renewed energy, their bodies soothed by the brief contact with land, their spirits lifted by the taste of fresh water and fruit lingering on their tongues. The ship eases out of the cove and back into open water, the island shrinking behind them into a soft, dark shape that soon blends with the horizon, another nameless mark in the endless geography of their journey. And as the night rises fully, wrapping the world in deep blue and shadows, the pirates return to their familiar routines, lighting lanterns, trimming sails, and taking their positions for the evening watch. Yet something in them has subtly changed, softened by the day's small mercies, and as they settle into the slow tempo of nighttime, they begin to sing. Not the rough, shouted shanties of drunken taverns, but low, melodic songs that drift gently across the deck like pieces of memory, tunes learned from mothers, from old shipmates, from distant ports where foreign words mixed with their own, and these songs, carried on the wind and mingled with the murmuring sea, turned the ship into a floating, fragile world of its own, suspended between the past and the unknown future. Under the great canopy of stars, the men's voices rise and fall in soft harmony, and even those who do not sing feel a stillness settle over them, a sense that, for one more night, they have survived the demands of the sea and earned a few hours of relative peace. One by one they drift back into their private thoughts, leaning against the rail to watch the phosphorescent glow that flickers in the water, tiny living lights that trace patterns in the wake of the ship like constellations fallen into the sea. And in that magical shimmer they see reflections of dreams they rarely speak aloud. A quiet inn in some forgotten harbor where no one asks about one's past, a small piece of land to call their own, enough gold to live out their days without fear of hunger or pursuit. And though most of them know such dreams are no more solid than the glimmering lights in the waves, they hold them close nonetheless, because hope, however fragile, is as necessary to them as wind and water. As the night deepens and the songs fade into silence, the ship continues on its endless path, cutting through the dark water like a slow, patient thought moving through the mind of the sea, and the pirates, scattered across the deck and below, surrender themselves once more to sleep, knowing that tomorrow will bring another dawn, another cycle of labor and watchfulness, another day filled with small tasks, fleeting dangers and rare, luminous moments of beauty. And in that repetition there is a strange comfort, for in a world as unpredictable as theirs, the simple fact that the ship still floats and the wind still blows is a blessing vast enough to fill the entire horizon. As the deep hours of the night unfold and the moon climbs higher, casting a pale, pearlescent glow across the restless water, the ship becomes quieter still, wrapped in a hush so complete that even the waves seem to soften their approach, lapping against the hull with gentle rhythmic touches like a mother soothing a child. And in this muted world the pirates sleep in fractured intervals, drifting in and out of dreams shaped by memory and imagination, their bodies swaying subtly in harmony with the ship's motion until the boundary between dreaming and waking becomes blurred, a fluid seam that only the sea itself could create. In the dim lantern light below deck, hammocks sway like slow pendulums, shadows ripple across the beams, and the soft exhale of the sleeping crew merges into a steady chorus that rises and falls in time with the ocean's breath. And though they are hardened men who have seen battle and storm and loss, there is something tender about the way they sleep now, as if in these hours they shed their ferocity and become simply human, tired travelers suspended within a fragile wooden cradle adrift in a vast, unknowable world. Above deck, the watchmen fight their own battles with exhaustion, blinking against the pull of sleep as the minutes stretch into what feels like entire lifetimes, and they shift their weight from one foot to another, rubbing arms and tapping fingers in quiet attempts to stay awake, their eyes scanning the dark horizon for any anomaly. A flicker of movement, a ripple where the water should be calm, the distant glint of a lantern or a sail. But the night remains undisturbed, cloaked in a serene stillness that is both comforting and unnerving, for sailors know that the sea's calmest moments often carry secrets beneath the surface, secrets that may rise without warning. Yet tonight the ocean seems content to cradle the ship gently, and the watchmen, though weary, feel something like gratitude in their bones, grateful that for one more night the sea has chosen mercy over menace. The moon hangs luminous and heavy, its reflection trembling across the water in a shimmering ribbon that stretches toward the ship like a silent invitation, and as the vessel moves, the ripples distort and mend the reflection in an endless dance of light and shadow, mesmerizing to anyone who dares stare too long. The lookout, perched high above in the crow's nest, gazes upward every so often, watching wisps of cloud drift lazily across the sky, their edges glowing faintly in moonlight, and he feels a strange, almost sacred solitude take hold, a sense that he is suspended not just above the deck but above the world itself, alone with the stars and the soundless sweep of the heavens. It is in moments like these that he remembers stories told by old sailors, tales of ghost ships guided by phantom crews, of spirits that walk the waves, of omens and signs whispered by constellations, and though he tells himself he does not believe such tales, his hand still tightens around the rail when a stray gust of wind brushes past him like an unseen presence. Time stretches on, slow and languid, until the night reaches its deepest point, the hour when even the sea seems to hold its breath, and then, gradually, almost imperceptibly, the world begins to lighten again. This time, however, something unusual stirs in the air. An unease too subtle to name, a tension that brushes the senses rather than the skin, and the first watchman to notice it pauses mid-step, turning his head as if listening for a faint, distant sound he cannot quite identify. The wind, once steady, shifts in an odd pattern, coming in hesitant, uneven pulses, and the surface of the water develops a strange texture, no longer smooth but faintly rippled in all directions at once, as though the sea were troubled by dreams of its own. The captain, unable to sleep deeply as always, rises from his narrow cot and steps onto the deck, his bare feet silent on the wood, his eyes immediately scanning the horizon with sharp intuition. He senses the change instantly, not with fear but with the calm recognition of a man who has weathered countless moods of the sea, and he takes a long, steady breath, tasting the air, feeling the pressure of the atmosphere on his skin, listening to the peculiar silence that always precedes something vast and inevitable. A storm is coming. He can feel it in the way the ropes vibrate with tension, in the subtle tremor that runs through the hull, in the strange hollowness of the wind. And though the sky above remains deceptively clear, he knows this tranquility will not last. Storms in these waters rarely announce themselves with clouds. They rise from the depths like beasts, sudden and unrestrained. He calls quietly for the quartermaster and the boatswain, his voice calm but firm, and they join him without hesitation, for seasoned sailors need no loud orders to understand when something important is unfolding. Together they walk the length of the ship, checking that barrels and crates are secured, that no rope lies loose, that the sails are ready to be drawn in at a moment's notice, and though the crew continues sleeping below in their hammocks, unaware of the approaching shift, the captain feels a quiet responsibility settle upon him, a familiar weight that he carries willingly, knowing that in the hours ahead, the ship will depend on his judgment as much as on the strength of its timber. Minutes pass, then longer moments, and slowly the wind dies entirely, leaving the world unervingly still, the sails drooping like exhausted wings, the water flattening into a surface so smooth it reflects the ship with perfect, mirror-like clarity, and this eerie stillness spreads through the air like a held breath, making even the watchmen uneasy. One of them glances upward, expecting to see clouds gathering, but the sky remains painfully clear, stars sharp and undisturbed, and yet there is no doubt now. Something vast and powerful is coming. Then, without warning, the horizon darkens, not with clouds, but with a distant wall of mist rising from the sea, glowing faintly under moonlight like an apparition, drifting closer with unnatural speed. The captain stiffens. He has seen this before. It is the breath of a storm that travels underwater, a surge of energy that breaks through the surface only at the last moment, and when it reaches a ship, it brings with it winds that can snap masts, waves that rise like mountains, and a confusion of currents that twist the hull in opposing directions. He gives the order now, firm and clear: "Wake the men." The call echoes through the ship, abrupt and urgent, and the crew jolts awake, stumbling from their hammocks, blinking in confusion as they scramble toward the deck. The moment they emerge into the open air, they feel it, the pressure, the stillness, the unnatural quiet, and their hearts quicken with a mix of fear and readiness, for no pirate survives long without learning respect for the sea's sudden rages. They move quickly, pulling in the loose sails, tightening ropes, securing weapons, stowing supplies, and the ship becomes a flurry of motion illuminated by the ghostly light of the moon and lanterns swinging wildly on their hooks. The mist reaches them abruptly, swallowing the ship in a cold, damp veil that makes the world shrink to a few feet of visibility, and the air becomes thick, heavy, charged with the strange electricity of an unseen threat. A moment later the wind returns, but not gently. It slams into the ship in a sudden brutal gust, snapping the sails taut, sending objects skittering across the deck, and causing several men to grab the nearest mast for balance. The sea heaves below them, rising as though stirred by some monstrous force, and the ship lurches violently, climbing the first massive swell before dropping into a trough so deep it feels as if the vessel might plunge straight into the earth's core. The storm hits full force now. Waves tower like dark giants, their crests foaming white under the moonlight, crashing against the hull with roars that drown out every shouted command, and the ship is tossed upward, sideways, downward, the deck pitching so dramatically that men must cling to anything they can grasp to keep from being hurled into the hungry sea. Thunder rolls across the heavens, not from clouds but from the sheer force of waves colliding, and lightning flashes within the mist, brief, skeletal illuminations that reveal the chaos in stark, ghostly detail. Sails whipping like torn banners, men hauling ropes with desperate strength, seawater surging across the deck in violent sheets. Yet through it all, the captain remains steady, his voice cutting through the storm like a blade as he guides the crew through each brutal shift. His hands gripping the wheel with unwavering determination, fighting the currents that try to wrench it from him. The pirates, though terrified, move with practiced efficiency. They trust the ship, they trust each other, they trust the captain. For in storms like this, trust is the only force stronger than fear. Minutes feel like hours, hours feel like a lifetime, and still the storm rages, bending wood, tearing rope, shaking the entire ship as if testing its resolve. Water pours over the deck, sweeping loose items overboard in an instant, drenching every man to the bone, filling the air with cold, stinging spray that blinds them and forces them to shout just to hear their own voices. But they endure. They hold fast. And then, as suddenly as it began, the storm's fury begins to ebb. The mist thins. The wind softens. The waves lose their towering rage, settling into rough but manageable swells. The ship, battered and groaning but still intact, rises out of the final trough and steadies itself, creaking like a living creature catching its breath after a brutal struggle. The pirates collapse onto the deck or lean hard against the railings, panting, shaking, wiping salt water from their eyes, their limbs trembling with exhaustion and relief. Above them, the first faint light of dawn appears once more on the horizon, a pale glow cutting through the remnants of darkness, fragile but unmistakable. The storm has passed. They have survived. The captain releases the wheel at last, exhaling a long, quiet breath, and the crew looks to him not for celebration but for reassurance, and he gives it with a tired but steady nod, a silent acknowledgement of their strength and the ship's endurance. And as the dawn swells into gold and their world begins once again, the pirates feel a deep, abiding truth settle into their bones. A pirate's life is not measured in treasure or battles, but in moments like these, moments where the sea tests them, breaks them, spares them, and in doing so binds them forever to its endless, shifting heart. As the dawn light slowly strengthens and spreads across the battered ship, revealing every soaked plank and frayed rope in soft gold, the pirates begin to gather themselves from the chaos of the night, rising shakily to their feet with the groggy, aching movements of men who have fought not flesh and blood but the raw, untamed force of nature itself, and as they steady their breathing, wiping sea salt from their eyes, they look around in a strange, unspoken silence, each man quietly taking stock of the ship's condition before daring to look inward and take stock of himself, relieved to find that despite the storm's merciless assault, they are still alive, still standing, still together. The ship, though wounded, floats defiantly on the vast morning sea, its masts swaying gently, its timbers groaning softly like an exhausted beast that has survived the hunt, and the sight of it fills the pirates with a quiet pride, for they know that many vessels, stronger, newer, more lavishly built, have been torn apart by storms far gentler than this one, and the fact that their weathered, patched-together craft has endured speaks not only to its construction but to the bond between ship and crew, a living partnership forged through countless shared battles. As the sun rises higher, burning away the last traces of mist, the sea transforms from a churning battlefield into a serene, glittering expanse once more, the waves smoothing into gentle rolling swells that reflect the light like ripples on molten glass, and the pirates feel the tension drain slowly from their bodies, replaced by a bone-deep fatigue that settles into their muscles like wet sand. Some sink down against the railing, heads bowed, chests heaving as they let exhaustion wash over them. Others slump onto coils of rope or drop to their knees, hands braced on the deck as they regain their sense of balance after hours of violent motion. A few simply sit with legs stretched out, staring blankly at the horizon, as if unable to reconcile the peaceful morning with the chaos they survived only minutes earlier. The captain walks the length of the deck, checking for injuries with the practiced eye of a man who has seen more storms than he cares to remember, and though he finds bruises, cuts, and shaken nerves, he sees no broken bones, no missing crew, no devastation beyond what they can repair. His shoulders loosen slightly with relief, though he keeps his expression calm and steady, for a captain's face must be an anchor in both storms and calm waters. He pauses at the wheel, running a hand along its worn surface, feeling the grooves left by his own fingers in countless previous battles, and he murmurs a quiet thank you to the ship. A habit the crew has long noticed but never questioned, for they know that every pirate who survives long enough eventually learns to speak to their vessel as if it were alive. Below deck, the cook begins preparing a meager but comforting meal. Heating water and stirring a thin porridge that carries a faint scent of grain, a smell unexpectedly soothing after a night filled with salt and fear. The aroma rises through the hatch, drifting across the deck and gently coaxing the more dazed crew members back into the present moment, and as they gather around to eat, each holding a dented tin bowl in trembling hands, they share small nods of solidarity, fleeting smiles of gratitude, and murmured comments about the storm. How the waves rose like mountains, how the mist glowed like ghostlight, how the ship seemed at times to fly and at times to drown. They do not exaggerate, there is no need. The truth is dramatic enough. And though their voices remain low, their words carry a warmth born of shared survival, the kind of warmth that binds men more deeply than coin or conquest ever could. Once their bellies are warmed and their spirits steadied, the crew begins the slow, methodical work of assessing the damage, moving with a quiet determination that reflects both their discipline and their gratitude. They check each mast, tracing fingers along the wood to feel for cracks. They examine the rigging, replacing lines that have frayed to near breaking. They haul buckets of seawater to wash the deck clean of debris. They hammer loose planks back into place. They wring out soaked canvas and hang it to dry. And as they work beneath the strengthening light of day, they fall almost naturally into a rhythm of labor that is more than routine. It is a way of reaffirming that they are still alive, still capable, still in control of their path despite the sea's attempt to remind them of their frailty. The storm has stripped away the distractions of daily life, leaving behind a stark clarity in their minds, and as they work, some of the pirates find themselves thinking of loved ones left behind. Faces they have not seen in years, voices they may never hear again. And though the thoughts carry a bittersweet sting, they also bring a kind of grounding, a reminder of the humanity that still lives beneath their hardened exteriors. Others think of old shipmates who did not survive previous storms, their memory lingering like shadows on the deck. Silent companions who remind them that survival is never guaranteed. But none of them speak these thoughts aloud. Pirates are not men who dwell openly on sentiment. Instead, they pour their unspoken emotions into the work of repairing the only home they have. By midday the ship is once again functional, though still bearing the visible scars of its battle. A bent railing here, a splintered beam there, patches of frayed rigging that look like weary spiderwebs, and beneath it all, the faint groans of strained timber echo like the sighs of a tired old soul. But the vessel floats true and steady, and the pirates, exhausted but reassured, finally allow themselves a moment's rest, leaning against the warm wood as the sun bathes them in gentle heat. The sea is calm again, stretching endlessly in every direction, its surface glinting as if sprinkled with fragments of shattered sunlight, and the pirates watch it with a mixture of awe and caution, fully aware that beneath that serene surface lies the same vast power that had tried to consume them only hours earlier. As the afternoon drifts by, a soft breeze returns, stirring the sails and filling the air with a faint whisper that sounds almost like a lullaby after the storm's howl, and the pirates begin speaking in low voices about their next destination, not in frantic tones of ambition but with steady, pragmatic consideration. Some suggest heading toward a well-hidden cove where they can make sturdier repairs. Others mutter about rumored trade routes heavy with merchant ships, and a few simply shrug, comfortable in the knowledge that the sea itself will eventually decide their course. The captain listens, not yet revealing his own plan, for he wants to feel the wind a little longer, to read the sea's subtle language before committing to any direction. Decisions made too quickly after a storm, he knows, can lead to trouble. The hours continue their slow slide toward evening, and a deep, drowsy calm settles over the ship. A fatigue not of despair but of hard-won triumph, the kind of exhaustion that comes only after facing something immense and unyielding and emerging on the other side with breath still in one's lungs. Some of the pirates begin humming soft tunes, melodies borrowed from distant shores, their voices blending seamlessly with the sound of the water brushing against the hull, and the music, quiet and unforced, drapes over the deck like a gentle blanket. A few men even doze off, their heads resting against coils of rope or on folded arms, lulled by the rocking of the sea and the warmth of the waning sunlight. The world feels fragile now, softened by the memory of the storm but also more precious because of it. And as the sun begins its slow descent toward the horizon, filling the sky with shades of amber and violet, the pirates experience an almost meditative stillness, a recognition that each quiet moment is a gift the sea can just as easily reclaim. They savor it, not with grand gestures, but with slow breaths, relaxed shoulders, and the simple act of being present in the fleeting calm. Evening arrives gently, without drama, the sky melting into a deep blue that hints at the night to come. The first stars appear, timid and pale, and the lanterns aboard the ship are lit, casting warm golden halos that flicker in the soft breeze. The repairs have held, the crew is safe, and the sea, for now, seems willing to let them rest. And in this fragile, peaceful transition from day to night, as the ship glides forward on wind that feels almost like a sigh, the pirates understand once more what their life truly is. A never-ending dance between danger and calm, exhaustion and wonder, destruction and renewal, all played out on the vast living stage of the sea. A place that can break them, spare them, test them and cradle them, all within a single turning of the sun. As twilight deepens and the last warm streaks of sunlight fade gently into the growing indigo of evening, the crew slowly emerges from the quiet haze of exhaustion, stretching stiff limbs and blinking themselves fully back into wakefulness, the events of the storm already beginning to feel distant and dreamlike, as though they had happened not hours ago but in some other lifetime altogether. Carried away by the tide of memory the way driftwood disappears beyond the horizon, and as the cool air settles over the deck, bringing with it the faint bite of approaching night, a few of the men begin to tidy up the last remnants of the day's repairs, coiling ropes into careful spirals, sweeping away splinters washed loose by the storm, and checking knots with the kind of methodical precision that comes only from long experience at sea, while others gather near the railings, gazing out at the vast expanse of water that now shimmers under the early glow of the moon, its surface dark yet flecked with faint silver where the light touches it, like a quiet, breathing galaxy spread wide beneath their feet. The ship continues its slow, steady glide across the calm sea, the sails billowing softly in the gentle wind, and the pirates begin moving with a renewed but unhurried energy, each settling into a task or a position that feels almost instinctual after so many years aboard. Some climbing up to adjust a rope or secure a loose line, others descending below deck to retrieve tools, blankets, or leftover supplies from the midday meal, their movements smooth and synchronized, as though the entire crew were part of a single living organism that has learned to sway, turn, and breathe in perfect unity with the shifting world around it. Slowly, the first stars appear overhead, faint at first but growing brighter as the sky darkens, and one by one the lanterns aboard the ship are lit, their warm golden glow flickering through the rigging and reflecting off the polished edges of metal and glass, creating a soft, swaying constellation of man-made lights that echo the heavens above. A few pirates begin to speak again, their voices low and steady, sharing memories of other storms they have endured. Stories of monstrous waves that rose higher than any mast, of tempests that split the sky with lightning bright enough to blind, of ships that were torn apart in a matter of minutes, leaving only wreckage and shattered dreams floating on the foam. And though the men's words are calm, spoken with an almost casual detachment, the quiet flicker in their eyes reveals the lingering weight of those memories, the knowledge that survival is never guaranteed and that the sea, for all its beauty, remains a vast and unpredictable force. Others choose not to speak at all, leaning silently against the railings or sitting cross-legged on the deck, staring out at the moonlit water with thoughtful expressions, their minds drifting through private reflections that rise and fall like the tide. Memories of home, regrets long buried, hopes that flicker uncertainly like distant lanterns in a night fog. As the night deepens further, a soft, cool breeze sweeps across the deck, lifting loose strands of hair and rustling the corners of the sails like the whisper of some unseen spirit, and the pirates instinctively draw closer to one another, seeking warmth in quiet companionship rather than fire. For though they are hardened men accustomed to danger and solitude, there is a comfort in simply being near one another, in the shared presence of those who understand the same struggles, the same joys, the same unspoken truths of a life lived far from the safety and predictability of land. The ship itself seems to sense this shift in mood, its timbers creaking with a gentle, almost affectionate rhythm as it moves through the water, the sound blending with the soft lap of waves against the hull to create a soothing, hypnotic symphony that wraps itself around the crew like a warm cloak. The cook appears from below deck with a small pot of something warm, an improvised broth made from scraps and spices collected from a dozen ports, and the men accept their shares with grateful murmurs, sipping slowly from wooden cups as the steam curls upward in delicate tendrils, carrying with it a faint scent of herbs that mingles with the salt air. The warmth of the drink spreads through their chests, easing lingering tension and steadying their breathing, and even the quietest among them feels a subtle glow of contentment rising within, a sense of having earned this moment of peace after enduring the wrath of the sea. Gradually, laughter begins to bubble up in small bursts, a soft chuckle here, a muffled snort there, as one pirate recounts how he was nearly flung across the deck by a wave but managed to cling to a rope at the last second, or how another accidentally shouted orders in his sleep before waking up midstorm, or how the cabin cat, who somehow managed to survive the chaos entirely unscathed, spent the entire ordeal perched atop a barrel, watching the raging water with regal indifference as though the storm were nothing more than an inconvenient rain shower. These tiny moments of humor, shared in hushed tones, weave themselves through the crew like threads of silver, binding them more tightly than any oath or contract ever could. As the hours stretch on, the moon rises higher in the sky, bathing the ship in a pale, serene glow that turns the deck into a dreamlike tableau. Shadows dancing across the wood, lanterns swaying like suspended fireflies, and the pirates themselves moving slowly, almost reverently, through the soft illumination, their silhouettes framed by the gentle brilliance of night. The ocean around them glistens with faint trails of bioluminescence, tiny sparks of life that glow briefly as the water is disturbed, tracing delicate patterns in the ship's wake and giving the impression that the vessel is slicing through a river of stars. Even the most stoic of the crew cannot help but stare in quiet wonder, humbled by the vast ethereal beauty surrounding them. It is in moments like this, when the world feels larger and more mysterious than any story ever told, that the men allow themselves to dream. Not of treasure or glory or victory in battle, but of simple human things. A warm bed in a quiet inn, a familiar voice calling their name, a morning where the ground does not sway beneath their feet, a life free from the constant pull of the horizon. They do not speak these dreams aloud, for pirates are not men who readily confess their softness, but the dreams settle over them nonetheless, softening their expressions and easing the weight of the scars they carry. And yet, even as they dream, they know the truth. The sea will always call them back. The horizon will always tempt them. The freedom of the open water, fierce and unforgiving as it is, has carved itself into their bones, and no amount of warmth or comfort or quiet longing can erase the bond they have with the ever-shifting world around them. They are wanderers by nature, forged by wind and wave, tethered not to land but to the endless, beckoning beyond. The night grows deeper still, the stars shining more brightly now that the moon has reached its peak, and one by one the pirates settle into positions of rest, some lying back on coiled ropes, others leaning against the masts, still others curling up near the lanterns where the warmth is strongest. Their voices fade into silence, replaced once more by the soft, steady sounds of the ship moving through the dark, and soon the crew drifts into sleep, their breaths rising and falling like the swell of the ocean, their bodies cradled by the familiar rhythm of their floating home. And so the ship sails on through the night, a lonely ember of warmth and life drifting across the vast, indifferent sea, carrying within its wooden walls a crew bound together by storms survived, battles won, losses endured, and dreams whispered only to the night itself. Whatever tomorrow brings, calm or chaos, treasure or danger, it will find them ready, as it always has, for the sea may shape them, test them, and threaten to take them, but it can never break them. As the first faint shimmer of dawn stretches across the horizon, soft and hesitant like a watercolor wash laid gently over the edge of the world, the pirates begin to rouse themselves once more, their bodies stirring not because they are rested. None of them slept deeply after the storm, but because life at sea answers to the rhythm of the sun more than it does to the desires of weary men. The sky brightens slowly, shifting from deep indigo to pale lavender, then to a muted gold that spills silently over the waves, turning the surface of the sea into a glistening mosaic of shifting light, and the pirates blink against the gentle brilliance, their eyes adjusting to the rebirth of another day. A few of the men stretch their arms and roll their shoulders, feeling the dull ache left by fighting the storm's fury, while others simply sit quietly, letting the warm dawn settle onto their skin like a healing balm, grateful to find themselves still alive, still afloat, still moving forward into the endless unknown. The ship, though battered and scarred, seems to stand a little taller in the morning light, as if proud of having survived the trial of the night, and its timbers creak with a softer, more contented sound, almost like a sigh of relief. The crew begins their morning tasks in unspoken harmony, coiling ropes still damp with seawater, checking knots tightened hastily during the storm, airing out soaked clothing, and sweeping the deck clean of debris. Their movements are slow but steady, the kind of steady shaped by long practice, where even exhaustion cannot disrupt the order of their routine. The cook emerges from below deck carrying a pot of thin but fragrant broth, and the smell drifts across the ship, warming spirits and stomachs alike. The men gather around, cupping the steaming bowls between their calloused hands, sipping in silence broken only by the rhythmic slapping of gentle waves against the hull. Above them, gulls wheel and cry in the brightening sky, their calls sharp yet strangely comforting, a sign that land somewhere is near enough for the birds to roam from. The men glance upward, following their spiraling movements with faint smiles, for gulls have a way of lifting a sailor's heart, reminding them that even in the boundless sweep of ocean, the solid earth is never truly out of reach. Yet the horizon around the ship remains a perfect ring of water, stretching endlessly in all directions, and the absence of visible land serves as a solemn reminder of how small the ship truly is, how small they themselves are, compared to the vast, ancient ocean that holds them. As the morning deepens, the sun climbing higher with confident brilliance, the pirates begin to speak quietly among themselves again. Conversation flows in gentle currents, memories of storms survived years ago, comparisons of last night's fury to others they have endured, small jokes about who screamed loudest when the ship nearly rolled, and murmured gratitude for the ship's resilience. These exchanges, though simple, carry within them an unbreakable camaraderie forged not through ease or comfort but through hardship shared equally among them all. There is no hierarchy in fear, no rank when waves rise taller than masts. Storms strip away every illusion and leave only truth, and the truth is that they need each other. The captain eventually joins them, descending from his quiet vigil near the bow, his expression thoughtful but serene. He stands for a moment in the center of the deck, hands clasped behind his back, his gaze sweeping over the crew as a father might look upon his children after a long and difficult night. When he speaks, his voice is low but firm, carrying the calm authority that makes men follow him into storms without hesitation. He tells them that the sea is offering a day of calm, that the winds are favorable, and that they will make repairs as they travel, trusting both the ship's strength and their own craftsmanship. His words bring a quiet sense of purpose to the crew, as though the mere act of acknowledging their survival grants them the strength to face the day ahead. Under the growing warmth of the sun, the pirates resume their work in earnest. Some climb the rigging, moving with the sure-footed agility of men born for the heights, tightening lines and checking for frayed sections that might betray them in the next storm. Others patch small cracks in the deck, using tar warmed by the sun to seal the wood. A few examine the cannons, ensuring the powder remains dry and the metal free of cracks, for pirates never allow their weapons to fall into disrepair. Battle can come upon them with as little warning as a storm, and preparation is the difference between victory and death. As the ship glides steadily forward through the sunlit water, the world feels open, limitless, alive with both danger and possibility. The sea is calm, but not still. It shimmers, dances, rises and falls in lazy breaths, its surface broken only by the occasional splash of a distant fish or the curling crest of a gentle wave. The sky above is an endless dome of blue, broken only by thin wisps of cloud drifting like faint brushstrokes across a painter's canvas. And all around them, the horizon remains a perfect, unbroken circle, a reminder that the sea cares nothing for direction or destination. It is the pirates who must choose their path. The afternoon arrives with a quiet heat that settles over the ship like a soft blanket, easing the tension in the men's shoulders and making their movements slower, more reflective. Some sit in the shade of the sails, sharpening blades or mending clothing. Others lean against the railing, letting their thoughts drift with the tide. A few slip into half-sleep, lulled by the warm sun and the soothing rhythm of the waves. Even the captain relaxes slightly, though he keeps one hand resting on the railing, feeling the pulse of the ship beneath his fingers, listening to the subtle language of wood and wind that only those long bound to the sea can truly understand. As the day continues in its slow, golden drift, the ship enters a region where the water turns an impossibly bright shade of blue, clear enough that the pirates can see fish darting beneath the surface in shimmering schools, their scales catching the sunlight like scattered jewels. The sight draws soft murmurs of wonder from even the most hardened men, for beauty at sea is always unexpected, always fleeting and always treasured. One pirate, younger than the rest, kneels at the railing, watching the fish with wide eyes, and for a moment he speaks of his childhood, of fishing in shallow tides near his home, of watching the water sparkle as though it held the secrets of the world. His voice is soft, almost wistful, and though the older pirates pretend not to listen, a few of them glance out at the water with distant expressions, remembering their own beginnings, their own moments of innocence long swallowed by the sea. Late in the afternoon, as the sun begins its slow descent once more, a faint glimmer appears on the horizon, not the sharp outline of a ship nor the dark shape of a storm, but a soft, golden shimmer that seems to dance just above the water. The captain narrows his eyes, watching closely as the shimmer shifts, grows, expands into the unmistakable silhouette of an island. The crew stirs with cautious excitement. Islands offer rest, resources, perhaps shelter or opportunity, but they also hold dangers. Hidden reefs, territorial animals, rival crews, or secrets better left undisturbed. The captain studies the island as it draws closer, noting the contours of its shoreline, the height of its cliffs, the density of its trees. It is not a large island, but it is lush, an emerald jewel rising from the endless sea, its vegetation glowing in the late afternoon light. From a distance, it seems untouched, wild, uninhabited, a place where time moves at its own pace, unbothered by the ambitions of men. The pirates feel the subtle shift within themselves, a mix of curiosity and caution. They begin preparing without being asked, checking blades, securing small boats, gathering rope, filling water jugs. They do not know what awaits them on this island, but they know that whatever it is, fresh fruit, freshwater pools, hidden coves, or even an abandoned settlement, it will be something different, something alive, something that breaks the vast monotony of open sea. As the ship glides toward the island, the air grows warmer, carrying the scent of earth and vegetation, scents forgotten after weeks at sea, and a hush falls over the deck, not out of fear but out of reverence. For pirates, who spend so much of their lives surrounded by water, the sight of land is always both comforting and unsettling, a reminder of what they left behind and what they can no longer claim. The sun dips lower, painting the island in shades of gold and amber, making every leaf shimmer as though dusted with treasure, and the pirates feel something stir within their chests. Not greed, not yet, but possibility. And as the ship anchors in the calm waters of a hidden cove, and the first small boat is lowered into the glow of the setting sun, the pirates realize that another chapter of their wandering life is about to unfold, one shaped not by storms or battles, but by the quiet, mysterious promise of land rising from the sea like a dream made real.